At my wife's award ceremony, she thanked everyone except me. So I revealed who funded her success. I am a man of 33. The night my wife stood on stage, holding a glass trophy and thanking everyone who believed in me, I sat in the front row listening to her list her parents, her mentors, her investors, her co-founder, her team, even her high school teacher, and skip over me like I didn't exist. When she said she had built everything from nothing, with no safety net, people rose to their feet and applauded. I was the only one in that room who knew I had been her safety net for 8 years. Her name is Laura. She was being honored as Young Innovator of the Year for her health tech startup. The event was big: hotel ballroom, round tables, stage lights, professional cameras, a red carpet at the entrance. I'd helped her practice the first draft of that speech at our kitchen table 2 weeks earlier. In that version, I was in it. Just one line, to my husband, Mark, who worked nights so I could chase this dream. That one line had kept me going through a lot of long shifts. Somewhere between the kitchen and the stage, that line disappeared. And something else had replaced it. When she reached the middle of the speech, she said, "There were people who told me to be realistic, to slow down, to stop aiming so high." I didn't listen. I kept going. The way she glanced in my direction for half a second, then looked away, told me exactly who she meant. Everyone around me clapped. My mother-in-law wiped tears from her eyes. Her father filmed her like she was on the moon. I sat there with my hands on my knees, my wedding ring suddenly feeling too tight. From the outside, this was her night. She was the first person in her family to start a company, the first to win an award like this. The magazine articles called her self-made, fearless, a woman who refused to settle. They wrote that she had funded her own education, that she bootstrapped her startup from the ground up. Every time I read those lines, there was a small sting. But I told myself it didn't matter whose name was in the article as long as we were building a life together. The truth is, there was nothing self-funded about her journey. It was funded by the man she didn't mention once in that ballroom, me. We met when we were 24, in a cheap co-working space downtown. I was doing entry-level IT support for small businesses, patching together enough freelance gigs to pay rent. She was a freshly graduated nurse who hated hospital politics and kept talking about using tech to fix healthcare. We ended up sharing a table a few times. She would ask me basic questions about apps, data, software. I'd help her set up spreadsheets, show her how to use online tools. She'd bring me coffee as a thank you. I fell for her slowly and then all at once. She had this way of making every idea sound bigger than it was. Talking to her made my life feel less small. We started dating. Late-night ramen, walking home in the rain, talking about how we didn't want to end up like our parents, tired, stuck, regretting everything. Her dream was clear: she wanted to build something that helped nurses and patients manage chronic disease at home. My dream was less clear. I liked tech. I liked solving problems. Mostly, I liked the idea of being good enough for someone like her. After a year together, she told me she wanted to go back to school for a master's in health management and innovation. The program was expensive. Her parents couldn't pay. She didn't have savings. The bank would give her a loan, but only with a guarantor. We sat at my tiny kitchen table, papers spread everywhere, numbers circled. She twisted a pen between her fingers and said quietly that she understood if it was too much responsibility for me, that she would figure something out. I remember looking at her and thinking, if I don't back her, who will? So I signed. My name went next to hers on the loan documents. I took a second job doing overnight server monitoring to cover rent and bills while she studied. Those 2 years were hard. She went to classes and internships during the day. I went from one IT gig to another and then sat in a dark office at night watching dashboards, making sure systems didn't crash. We saw each other in passing and on weekends. I learned how to function on 4 hours of sleep. When she got stressed about assignments, I proofread her projects and helped her with presentations. When she doubted herself, I told her she was going to change everything. She finished top of her class. At her graduation, she thanked her professors and classmates. In private, she hugged me and said, "I couldn't have done this without you." I held on to that sentence for a long time. After the master's, she didn't want a hospital job. She wanted to start her own thing. That meant more sacrifices. We moved into a smaller apartment to save money. I sold my old car. My dad had died a year earlier and left me a small amount of money and his tools. I used almost all of that money to help her register the company, build the first version of the app, and pay for a designer. I kept the tools in a box in our closet as the only physical thing left from him. She promised me that once things got going, we'd be partners in every sense. At first, I believed it. I helped with the tech side in the evenings. I handled anything boring: paperwork, domain renewals, email setups. She did the medical content and front-facing stuff. She was better at talking to people. When she pitched, you could see investors lean forward. When I spoke, they just nodded politely. Still, we were a team. That's what I thought. The first cracks showed up when she got her first small grant. It was a few thousand from a local innovation fund. The press release called her a brave founder who bet everything on her idea. When I joked, "You mean we bet everything?" she smiled and kissed my cheek, but didn't correct the wording. Then came her co-founder, Alex. He was an MBA guy with a nice watch and a car that didn't sound like it was about to die. He joined to handle strategy and growth. At first, I was relieved. It meant maybe I could breathe a little. Instead, I watched as the "we" in her sentences slowly shifted. When she talked about the company, she said Alex and I more than we or Mark and I. They started spending long hours together, dinners with investors, hackathons, startup weekends. I wasn't worried about anything romantic, that wasn't the vibe. I was worried about something else: they were building a version of her story that didn't include me at all. The first time I saw it in writing was in a magazine profile. The journalist wrote that Laura had worked multiple jobs to pay her way through school, that she had pulled herself up without support, that she had bootstrapped the company with savings from her hospital shifts. There was no mention of the guarantor who would be paying off her student loan if things went wrong. No mention of the extra job. No mention of my dad's money. When I raised it, she brushed it off. "They just write what sounds inspiring," she said. "If I say my boyfriend helped, it makes me look dependent. Investors like a strong founder." "I'm not asking to be in the magazine," I said. "I'm asking you not to erase me." She sighed. "You're not erased. You're my husband. That matters more than some article." We got married the year the app finally launched. It was a small wedding, just family and close friends. At the reception, in front of everyone, she thanked me for believing in her when no one else did. She said I was the rock under everything she was building. Her father shook my hand and said I was a good man. My mother-in-law cried happy tears. For a while, it felt like the sacrifices were worth it. But success has a way of rewriting people's memories. The app grew faster than anyone expected. Clinics signed up. Insurance companies at least wanted to talk. A bigger investor came on board, but only if things looked clean. That meant contracts, shares, roles. I assumed, after all the nights I'd spent fixing bugs and reading contracts, that I'd be part of that picture. Even a small part. One evening, she came home with takeout and a folder. She put both on the table. "We need to talk about something," she said. Inside the folder was a prenup draft and a shareholder agreement. The prenup said that the company, present and future, would be entirely hers, not part of marital assets. The shareholder document officially named her and Alex as co-founders. I wasn't in it. I stared at the papers. "You want me to sign this?" I asked. "It's just protection," she said quickly. The investors want to be sure that if anything happens between us, you can't take half the company and block deals. It's standard. It doesn't change what we have. It changes everything, I said. On paper, I don't exist. She reached across the table for my hand. Mark, you do exist. You exist here. With me. With Noah when we have kids. The company is my job. Our marriage is ours. They're separate. I hated how much sense that made and how wrong it felt at the same time. We argued. I said it wasn't fair considering how much I'd already put in. She said, put in, like she didn't like the phrase. She reminded me she was the one taking the public risk, the one whose name was on the door. She said if I trusted her, I wouldn't need my name on anything. Those words stayed with me, if you trust me. I'd heard them before, from my mother when she wanted me to side with her, from friends when they wanted a favor. Now my wife was using them to get my signature away from the company I'd helped build. Eventually, I signed. I told myself I was choosing my marriage over my ego, that I was being mature, that I wasn't going to fight my wife like a stranger in court before anything even went wrong. I signed the paper that said I had no claim over the thing that had consumed our 20s. As the company grew, our marriage shrank. Laura was always somewhere else, physically at the office, mentally in her inbox, emotionally in an endless pitch. I saw her mostly in calendar invites, dinner with investors, event with mentors, early meeting with Alex. When she was home, she was exhausted. When I tried to talk about kids, she said she wanted to wait until after the next funding round. I kept working my IT job, still paying off her student loan every month as guarantor, still covering half the mortgage on the apartment we rarely enjoyed together. Whenever I mentioned the loan, she would say she planned to pay it off once things stabilize, but there was always a reason to wait a little more. The months leading up to the award ceremony were the worst. The nomination alone brought media attention. There were interviews, photo shoots, panels. In every story, she became more of a lone warrior. The journalist who had once briefly mentioned a supportive partner didn't even do that now. It was all her vision, her grit, her hustle. When I showed up at events as her husband, people assumed I was just there for the free champagne. One night, 2 weeks before the ceremony, I came home from a late shift and opened her laptop by accident. I thought it was mine, they're the same model. The screen woke up. I saw an open email thread between her and Alex. At first, I was going to close it. Then I saw my name. Alex had written about the upcoming award. He said this was the perfect moment to position Laura as completely independent, that mentioning a husband who funded her education will dilute the narrative. He wrote that personal sacrifices are understood, but we need to frame them as yours, not his, for the sake of brand. Laura had replied, I know. He's sensitive about this. I'll talk to him eventually. For now, I'll keep it vague. I can't keep carrying his feelings and the company at the same time. Carrying my feelings. Further down the thread, older messages. One about the prenup, discussing strategies to get me to sign without scaring him. One about kids, saying she couldn't imagine taking a business break just to change diapers, that Mark still thinks in small-town family terms. One line made me feel physically ill, if it doesn't work with him, I'll be okay. The company is legally mine. Worst case, we settle, and I move on. I just need to get through this next year clean. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark. I didn't sleep. I went to work the next day on autopilot. I didn't mention the emails. I didn't want to be the needy husband who read his wife's messages and begged her to see him. Instead, I did what I always did, I swallowed it and kept going. And then the ceremony happened. She walked on stage in a tailored suit I had helped pay for. Her hair and makeup were professionally done. The slides behind her showed the journey of the company, graphs, photos of the small first office, pictures of her and Alex with whiteboards. No pictures of me. No mention of the nights I'd spent fixing the early bugs. No mention of the guarantor. No mention of my father's money. Tonight is not about me, she said at the start, the way they teach you in speech coaching. It's about everyone who helped me get here. She thanked her parents for believing in her even when she wanted to do crazy things. She thanked Alex for sharing the load and pushing the vision further. She thanked her mentors and the grant organizations. She thanked her high school teacher for encouraging her to love science. She thanked a friend who brought her coffee during late-night coding sessions. She thanked the incredible team who trusted a young founder with big ideas. She did not thank the man who had signed the loan that allowed her to do the masters. She did not thank the man who had worked nights and weekends. She did not thank the man who had sold his father's inheritance to fund her first prototype. When she reached the part where she said, "I built this from nothing," something in me snapped. My heart was pounding. My face felt hot. The clapping sounded far away. For a brief moment, I thought about standing up and walking out, just leaving the whole circus behind. But as she went on, as she talked about people who told her to slow down, like I was some anchor dragging her, another thought formed in my mind. If she was going to rewrite history in public, then maybe, just this once, would tell the actual story in public too. After the speech, the host came on stage for a short Q&A. They always did that, a few light questions for the cameras. Who inspired you? What advice would you give young founders? The usual. When the host asked if there were any questions from the audience, my hand went up before I even realized I was moving it. He smiled and gestured toward me. "Yes, the gentleman at the front," he said. "Please stand and tell us your name." I stood up. The lights were bright. Hundreds of eyes turned towards me. Laura's smile froze when she saw who it was. "My name is Mark," I said. My voice sounded steady, even though my insides were shaking. I looked at Laura and added, "I'm her husband." The room shifted. Some people murmured. Others smiled, expecting some cute question about our relationship. Laura's eyes widened just enough for me to see panic behind the stage persona. I took a breath. "I don't really have a question," I said slowly. "I just wanted to add something to the story, since tonight is about everyone who helped you get here. And for the first time in 8 years, I decided I wasn't going to be invisible anymore." I could see the host hesitating, his hand halfway to the microphone, trying to decide if he should cut me off or let me speak. Laura opened her mouth, probably to redirect the moment, to say something like, "Let's talk about this later, honey." Too late. I started talking. And once I did, I couldn't stop. I don't remember planning the words. They just came out, one after another, like they had been waiting years for this exact moment. "I'm really proud of you," I said first, because that part was still true, twisted as everything else was. "I've watched you work hard, fall apart, get back up. You deserve recognition for that. But there's a part of this story that kept getting erased tonight, and I can't pretend I don't see it anymore." The room went quiet. Even the clink of glasses stopped. The host shifted uncomfortably on stage. Laura gave a tight smile, the kind you give a child you're trying to nudge back into line. "Mark, maybe we can," she began. I raised the program booklet in my hand slightly and kept my eyes on her. "I just want to say one thing," I continued. "When you say you built this from nothing, that you had no safety net, that nobody believed in you, that isn't true. I believed in you. I was your safety net. I co-signed the loan that paid for your master's degree. I worked nights so you could study during the day. I used my late father's savings to pay the initial costs of your company so you wouldn't start with debt." You could feel the shift in the air. People glanced at each other. Some looked away, embarrassed to witness something so personal. Others leaned in, hungry for drama. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't point fingers at anyone but the woman on stage who had just rewritten our history as if I had been a stranger. "I remember those first years," I said. You apologizing because you couldn't contribute much to rent. Me telling you not to worry because you would make it back one day. You telling me we were a team. That if one of us succeeded, we both did. That all of this was ours. Laura's jaw clenched. I saw her PR brain spinning, looking for a way to flip this. The host stepped forward toward the mic, but she subtly held up a hand to stop him. She knew that cutting me off would look worse. I don't want credit from the media, I said. I don't need my name in articles. I've never cared about that. But I sat there tonight listening to you thank everyone in your life, your parents, mentors, co-founder, teachers, your barista, practically, and you couldn't spare one line for the person who sat across from you at a chipped kitchen table helping you build the first prototype while he fell asleep in front of a screen at 3 a.m. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back actually said, "Wow," under their breath. I heard it like a slap and a confirmation at the same time. I took out my phone. My hands shook, but I forced myself to stay slow. Since you like evidence in your pitch decks, I said quietly, let me add some of my own. On the screen were a few photos I'd gathered over the years and never deleted. A picture of me, half asleep, hunched over her old laptop with code on the screen. A screenshot of the loan confirmation email with both our names on it. A bank transfer receipt showing the payment from my account to hers labeled seed money. I had never planned to use them like this. They were just personal reminders of the road we'd walked. I'm not here to drag you down, I went on. I'm not saying you didn't work hard. I know you did. I've seen you cry over bugs and regulations and investors who didn't take you seriously. But tonight, when you turned people like me into those who told you to slow down and those who doubted you, you crossed a line. I never doubted you. I just didn't want to be erased so your story would sound cleaner for people in suits. Laura finally spoke. Mark, she said, her voice strained, this isn't the time or place. Can we please talk about this privately? You're making things uncomfortable. I let out a nervous laugh that didn't feel like mine. Things have been uncomfortable for a long time, I said. We just managed it in private so your public image could stay perfect. The host tried to cut in with a joke about passionate support systems, but nobody laughed. I looked at Laura one last time. I'm going to sit down now, I said. I'm not going to say anything else. But before I do, I just want the room to know this. Sometimes when you see a self-made success story, there's someone behind it who gave up their own dreams, their own sleep, their own money, and sometimes that someone gets rewritten as a footnote or a villain because that makes the narrative easier to sell. Then I sat down. For a few seconds, the silence was suffocating. Then the host clapped nervously and said something about strong partnerships and every story having many heroes. A few people followed his cue and also clapped, but it was half-hearted. The rest of the event stumbled forward, off balance. The photos afterward looked strained. In some of them, you can see Laura's jaw locked tight while she holds the trophy. We didn't speak in the car. I drove. She stared out the window. The trophy sat in the back seat like a third passenger. When we got home, the explosion came. How could you do that? She demanded as soon as the door closed. In front of everyone? On my night? You humiliated me. I told the truth, I said. You stood there and pretended I was a stranger or, worse, an obstacle. You didn't just forget me, Laura. You rewrote me as one of the people who tried to hold you back. She threw her clutch on the couch. Do you have any idea how you looked? Bitter, jealous, petty, like a cliché of a man who can't handle his wife's success. I've handled your success just fine, I said. I helped build it. What I can't handle is being erased from the story entirely. Or being talked about in emails as the weight you carry. She froze. You read my emails? Yes, I said. By accident at first. Then on purpose. And I saw how you talk about me. About kids. About moving on clean if you have to. About getting me to sign away any rights before your valuation goes up. Her face went pale. You're twisting everything, she snapped. Those emails were strategy discussions. You know how investors are. They don't like complicated personal lives. And what am I? I asked. A complication? A liability on a term sheet? She didn't answer. Instead, she tried a different angle. You don't understand what it's like for me, she said. Every room I go into, I have to prove I deserve to be there. I can't show weakness. If I start talking about how my husband paid for my education, they'll say I didn't earn it. They'll say I'm only here because of you. Do you want that? I want honesty, I said. And I want basic respect. You could have said one line, thank you to my husband who stood by me. That's not weakness. That's truth. What you did instead wasn't about investors, it was about ego. We fought for hours, the same arguments in circles. At some point, she said the sentence that changed everything for me. Mark, I can't keep carrying your need to be recognized in my company at the same time, she said. I'm tired. If you can't accept that this is my thing, maybe we made a mistake. I felt something inside me go cold. Our marriage was supposed to be our thing, I said quietly. This house. Our future. The company was part of that, not separate from it. But you've been carving me out piece by piece. First from the story. Then from the documents. Now from your life. We slept in separate rooms that night. In the morning, she left early for meetings. She didn't kiss my cheek. She didn't leave a note. By lunchtime, social media had clips from the ceremony. Someone had recorded my little speech on their phone. It was already on Twitter, under a caption like, "Awkward moment at Startup Award Gala." The comments were exactly what you'd expect, some people calling me insecure, some calling her ungrateful, others saying it was none of our business. A few pointed out the structural issue, the way self-made stories erase unseen support. Laura texted me a link with one sentence, "Are you happy now?" I wasn't happy. I felt exposed, raw, half ashamed, half relieved. I hated that something so private was now content for strangers. I also knew I'd finally said out loud what had been eating me alive silently for years. The next days were chaos. Her PR advisor called, furious, saying we had to get ahead of the narrative. They drafted a joint statement for us to post, about how we were working through personal matters, and how, behind every success there is a network of support. It sounded fake. I refused to put my name on something that pretended this was a minor misunderstanding. Her parents called. Her mother said I'd been cruel. Her father, surprisingly, asked me quietly over the phone if what I said was true. When I told him about the loan, the night shifts, my dad's money, the recordings of the emails, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, she forgot who was in the room before those cameras. She moved into a short-term rental under the pretext of needing space. Officially, it was because she needed to be closer to the office. Unofficially, our marriage had cracked in a way that might not mend. I started seeing a therapist because I didn't know how to handle the mixture of love, anger, betrayal, and guilt inside me. I felt guilty for blowing up her gala. I felt betrayed that she had pushed me out of her story. I still loved the girl who had once brought me coffee in a co-working space and told me we were a team. I wasn't sure I loved the woman who saw me as a PR problem. In therapy, I realized two important things. First, I had been erasing myself long before she did it publicly. Every time I swallowed a hurt, every time I told myself, it doesn't matter if my name is on it, I was training her, and myself, to believe I didn't need acknowledgement. My silence made it easier for her to step over me. Second, her behavior was a choice, not an accident. She hadn't just forgotten to mention me in one speech. She had systematically removed me from her origin story because it made her look more heroic. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a strategy. A week later, we met with a couples counselor. The session was rough. Laura cried. I cried. We laid everything out, the loan, the money, the emails, the prenup, the gala. She admitted she had been afraid of being seen as dependent. I admitted I had let resentment build up without forcing honest conversations earlier. I didn't do this to hurt you, she said. I did it to survive in an industry that doesn't take women seriously. I believe that, I said. But somewhere along the way, you stopped noticing when survival turned into selfishness. You stopped noticing when your story became more important than the people in it. The counselor asked her if she was willing to genuinely share credit, legally and publicly, or if she wanted to keep the clean, self-made narrative at all costs. They asked me if I could accept being in a supporting role without needing constant recognition, as long as I wasn't erased. It was brutally honest. We left that session knowing something clear: there was no version of our future where things went back to how they were. We either had to build something new on honesty, or we had to stop. Over the next month, Laura paid off the remaining student loan in full, from the company account. She transferred back the amount I had put in from my father's money. She emailed her PR people and requested corrections in a few online bios, adding, with the support of my husband, who backed my education in the early days. Some sites changed it, some didn't. The internet moves fast. She also posted a statement on her company's page, not some polished PR nonsense, but a real one. In it, she wrote that in telling a self-made story, she had erased the contributions of people closest to her, including her husband. She admitted she had framed her journey in a way that made her look alone when she never was. She wrote, "Success isn't built in a vacuum, and I regret the ways I've let the narrative of independence make me forget interdependence." The comments were split. Some people praised her honesty. Others called it damage control. A few said I was still weak for airing things in public. I stopped reading after a while. The point was never the internet. It was us. Did her statement fix everything between us? No. Money can be transferred back. Credit can be adjusted. But trust, once cracked, doesn't go back to its original shape. I could forgive her. I wasn't sure I could ever forget what it felt like to sit in that front row, watching the woman I loved talk about building from nothing, while I sat there knowing I had been the nothing. We tried for a few more months. We had some good days, like old times. We cooked together. We laughed. We remembered why we started. We also had days where every small disagreement felt loaded with the weight of the gala, the emails, the prenup. Eventually, we made the hardest decision of my life: to separate. Our divorce, when it came, was quieter than the award ceremony. No cameras. No applause. We agreed on terms without dragging lawyers into a war. She kept the company, obviously, but this time there was a clear acknowledgement of my early contributions in writing, even if they didn't translate into shares. We sold the apartment and split the equity in a way that finally felt fair. It wasn't about punishing each other, it was about closing a chapter cleanly. People on the outside speculated. They often do. Some said I couldn't handle a strong woman. Some said she traded up from a husband to a company. The truth is less dramatic and more painful: we both changed, but we didn't change together. Her ambition outgrew the space she left for us. My quiet support turned into invisible labor. We both allowed it. Today, I live in a much smaller place. I went back to study part-time, something I'd put off for years because we couldn't afford both our dreams. I work fewer night shifts. I sleep more. I still follow her company from a distance sometimes. They're doing well. She's still on stage a lot. In some newer talks, I've noticed she frames her story slightly differently. She says, "I was lucky enough to have support in the early years." She never names me directly. She doesn't have to. I know who she means. Do I regret standing up at that award ceremony? Sometimes, when I think about how public it all became, I cringe. I wish I'd had the courage to confront her earlier, in private, with the same clarity. But most of the time, I don't regret it. That moment forced the truth into the light. It forced her to see what she'd done. It forced me to stop hiding behind my own loyalty. The hardest part to accept is this: I wasn't just a victim. I helped build the pedestal she stood on and then acted surprised when she didn't pull me up on stage. I taught her, by my silence, that my sacrifices didn't need to be named. At my wife's award ceremony, she thanked everyone except me. So I revealed who funded her success, not just with money, but with years of my life, my sleep, my father's savings, my quiet belief in her. She kept the trophy. She kept the stage. I kept something else, the knowledge that I'm allowed to exist in my own story, even if that means walking away from someone else's.
Follow me for more stories.